You're standing there in line at the bank, watching the people around you scrolling on their phones, and suddenly a strange sensation takes hold of you. While everyone seems to know exactly where they're going, you feel like you're watching a movie you're not part of. The whole world talks about transformation, incredible changes, how everything is evolving rapidly, but you look inside and find only a deep exhaustion, as if your energy has been sucked into an invisible black hole. It's like being an observer at a party where everyone dances to music you can't hear. Franz Kafka knew exactly this sensation, this strange disconnection between the world's promises and the emptiness that grows within the soul. Today we're diving into this shadowy yet liberating territory, where exhaustion isn't weakness, but perhaps the only honest response to a world that has lost contact with its own humanity. Because there's something deeply revealing about the fatigue of those who refuse to pretend everything is fine when it clearly isn't. If you've made it this far, you probably know what I'm talking about. That feeling of swimming against an invisible current while everyone around you seems to float effortlessly. I want you to know you're not alone in this journey. This channel exists for those who feel different, who question, who sometimes feel displaced in a world that promises instant happiness but delivers only more anxiety. Here we explore these deep questions with honesty and care, without magic formulas, but with genuine understanding. If this resonates with you, consider subscribing and becoming part of this community of thinking souls. And if this content is touching something in you, leave a like so we can reach other people who also need to know they're not alone in this search for authenticity in an increasingly artificial world. Kafka had a unique way of capturing that sensation of being trapped in a mechanism we never stop to question. In his stories, characters wake up transformed into insects or get lost in labyrinthine bureaucracies. But he was actually talking about something very real that we all experience. That feeling that we're participating in a game whose rules nobody explained properly to us, where everyone seems to know what to do except us. The exhaustion Kafka described wasn't just physical, it was existential. It was the fatigue of trying to fit the soul into a form it wasn't made for. Imagine a bird trying to swim at the bottom of the ocean. It's not that it's inadequate, it's that it's in the wrong environment, trying to use skills that weren't made for that place. The modern world has created a particularly cruel illusion. Every day we're bombarded with promises of revolutionary changes. Technology will solve our problems. The next course will unlock our potential. The next productivity technique will give us control over our lives. But if you stop to observe honestly, you'll realize that this constant promise of external change only increases our sense of internal inadequacy. It's like being on a treadmill that accelerates faster and faster, and the faster we try to run to keep up, the more exhausted we become. Kafka understood this decades before the digital age. He saw that the systems that promise to free us often become our own prisons. Think about the last time you felt genuinely rested, not just physically but in your soul. You can't remember, can you? This happens because we live in a culture that confuses movement with progress, noise with communication, information with wisdom. We're constantly stimulated but rarely nourished. It's like trying to feed yourself only on sugar. It gives immediate energy, but soon after comes the crash, and you're hungrier than before. The exhaustion so many people feel today isn't a sign of laziness or inadequacy. It's the natural symptom of trying to live a life that wasn't designed for the human soul. Kafka had an almost prophetic perception of how modern systems would dehumanize us. In his stories, characters struggle against incomprehensible bureaucracies where nobody knows exactly who makes the decisions or why certain rules exist. This wasn't science fiction. It was a surgical analysis of the direction our civilization was taking. Today, how many times a day do you feel like Gregor Samsa, waking up transformed into something you don't recognize, trying to communicate with a world that no longer speaks your language? How many times do you wonder if you're actually living your life or just playing a role someone else wrote for you? And have you felt this deep disconnection? That moment when you're surrounded by people but feel completely alone, as if you were the only one questioning whether all this rushing around really makes sense. If you're going through this now, if you feel this exhaustion of the soul that goes far beyond physical fatigue, leave in the comments. I also feel this disconnection. Your courage in sharing this could be exactly what another person needs to read today to know they're not alone in this feeling. Sometimes the most revolutionary thing we can do is admit our vulnerability in a world that teaches us to pretend everything is always fine. What Kafka understood, and what few dare to admit, is that sometimes exhaustion is the smartest response our psyche can give. When a system is fundamentally broken, continuing to try to function within it isn't virtue, it's self-sabotage. It's like continuing to try to make a device work that burned out inside. You can press all the buttons you want, but nothing will happen because the problem isn't in your technique. It's in the equipment itself. Our civilization has created structures that go against basic human nature, and then tells us the problem is with us when we can't adapt perfectly to these structures. Notice how our society treats exhaustion. Instead of questioning why so many people are exhausted, we offer more coffee, more vitamins, more time management techniques. It's like someone being crushed by a giant rock, and instead of removing the rock, offering exercises to strengthen the spine. Kafka saw this absurdity with crystal clarity. His characters can't find exits not because they're inadequate, but because the structures around them are intrinsically insane. The labyrinth has no exit because it was built to be a labyrinth, not a path. There's a spiritual depth in exhaustion that we rarely recognize. When the soul is tired of pretending, when we can no longer sustain masks that never really served us, something sacred is happening. It's as if our deepest essence were going on strike, refusing to participate in a theater that betrayed its fundamental values. Kafka captured this masterfully by showing characters who, even in absurd situations, maintain an inner dignity that the surrounding systems try to destroy. Gregor Samsa may have transformed into an insect, but his humanity remains untouched, observing, questioning, silently resisting. The spiritual exhaustion so many feel today is, paradoxically, a sign of health. It's proof that something authentic still exists within us that refuses to be completely domesticated. It's our soul saying, "This isn't right, this isn't real life, this isn't what I came here for." How many people do you know who seem to have infinite energy for things that don't really matter, but get exhausted just thinking about following their true dreams? This happens because it's much easier to live a borrowed life than to create your own life. Kafka understood that real transformation is rarely comfortable or obvious. In the Metamorphosis, Gregor's transformation is initially seen as a catastrophe, but gradually reveals truths about the family and society that were hidden by artificial routine. Similarly, the exhaustion we feel may be the first step of a necessary metamorphosis. Maybe it's not us who need to adapt better to the world. Maybe it's the world that needs to rediscover what really matters for the human experience. There's a type of fatigue that results from constant struggle against our own nature. Like a plant trying to grow in soil that doesn't have the right nutrients, we spend energy trying to force ourselves to flourish in environments that weren't made for us. Kafka showed this through characters who fight heroically against systems that were never designed to allow their victory. It's not that they're weak, it's that they're playing a game with secret rules that were made to guarantee their defeat. The true heroism lies in recognizing this and stopping blaming ourselves for not being able to win a rigged game. Modern society has created a perverse inversion where those who question are seen as problematic and those who passively accept are considered well-adjusted. But Kafka shows us that sometimes maladjustment is the sanest possible response. When a system is sick, being healthy within it is practically impossible. It's like trying to maintain sanity in a madhouse. If you succeed, it's probably because you've stopped being truly sane. Exhaustion may be our psyche protecting our authenticity, creating a natural barrier against influences that corrode our essence. There's a strange beauty in recognizing our existential exhaustion. It's like finally admitting we're lost after hours of pretending we know the way. This moment of brutal honesty can be the beginning of a real journey, instead of the walking in circles we were doing while pretending to be making progress. Kafka showed that sometimes the only way out is to stop looking for conventional exits and accept that our situation may require a completely new response, one that hasn't yet been catalogued in self-help manuals. The world promises changes, but rarely asks what kind of change we really need. Most of the transformations offered are cosmetic, changing jobs, changing cities, changing appearance. But the change our soul asks for is more radical, changing our relationship with reality, questioning the basic premises about what constitutes a well-lived life, discovering who we are when we stop trying to be who we think we should be. This change can't be bought, programmed, or optimized. It emerges from silence, from pause, sometimes from the very exhaustion that forces us to stop and rethink everything. Kafka had an extraordinary ability to find the sacred in the absurd. His characters face impossible situations with a dignity that transcends circumstances. Similarly, our exhaustion may carry a sacred message that something still exists in us that refuses to be broken, that maintains higher standards than the surrounding world is willing to accept. It's our soul making a conscientious objection, refusing to participate in a civilization that has lost contact with the values that truly sustain human life. When we observe our exhaustion without judgment, we discover it has its own wisdom. It forces us to stop, to question, to prioritize in ways our busy mind could never do. It's as if our body and soul conspired to save us from a life that was slowly killing us. Exhaustion then becomes not a problem to be solved, but a teacher to be heard, a guide to a way of living more aligned with our true nature. Kafka's genius lay in showing that we're not alone in this feeling of displacement. Generations of people have felt this same disconnection, this same fatigue from trying to fit the soul into a form that doesn't serve it. There's something deeply comforting in knowing that others have navigated these turbulent waters and left maps in the form of stories, art, deep reflections on the human condition. Our exhaustion may be solitary, but it's not unique. It's part of a much broader conversation about what it means to live authentically in a world that rewards conformity. Perhaps the greatest transformation we can experience is to stop trying to transform ourselves and start accepting what we already are. Not the passive acceptance that gives up on growing, but the active acceptance that recognizes our true nature and stops trying to mold it according to external expectations. Kafka showed characters who, even in extreme situations, maintained an inviolable essence. They could be transformed externally, but something central remained untouched, observing, silently resisting dehumanization. The exhaustion so many feel today may be the harbinger of a collective awakening. When systems no longer work, when promises repeatedly prove empty, when the very idea of progress begins to sound like a cruel joke, something new can be born. But first, we need to cross the desert of recognition, admit we're lost before we can find a true direction. Kafka taught us that sometimes the first step to freedom is to completely recognize our prison. In the quietude that exhaustion imposes, we can begin to hear voices that were muffled by the constant noise of modern life. Our intuition, our inner wisdom, our authentic values, all of this becomes clearer when we stop trying to keep up with the insane pace of the external world. It's like leaving a very noisy party and finally being able to hear our own thoughts. The silence we fear may be exactly the space our soul needs to reorganize itself and find its own direction. Kafka left us a gift, permission to admit that not everything makes sense, that not every struggle is worth it, that sometimes the wisest response is to stop fighting and start observing. Not the passive observation of someone who gave up, but the active observation of someone who is finally paying attention to what really matters. Our exhaustion may be the beginning of this observation, the moment when we finally stop running long enough to ask, where exactly are we running to, and why?